Many perspectives on the Force is how new powers are often created in Star Wars lore. It's how many individuals become extremely powerful in their own right, advancements, an evolution. With that said, one must make a choice. Many who use the Force lean towards either one side, the light or the dark. But there are those few out there who would actually strive to complete a balance of the Force. A balance as understood as a merging of ideologies. The ideologies, power, wisdom, of both the light and the dark side of the Force, giving one a full view, or at least that's what some Jedi may teach you. Delving into the pages of old Sith lore, as well as more recent Sith lore, we come to a revelation. The Dark Lord of the Sith, Darth Plagueis, hated this ideology, an ideology known as potentium. And while it is true that potentium bred some of the most powerful Force wielders in history, such as the Jedi Master Kyle Katarn, Plagueis believed that it was an abomination. It was bad enough that he saw the inherent weakness in a Jedi, but the fact that some of them were so foolish into believing that they could control the dark side, telling themselves a perpetual lie, caused Darth Plagueis the Wise to shake with fury. Very few individuals have achieved true balance in the Force, with Darth Revan being one of the more popular. So what are the deeper mysteries of potentium and Darth Plagueis? The character in question today is Kyle Katarn, an ex-stormtrooper turned Jedi Master, who ends up becoming the Battle Master in Luke Skywalker's new Jedi Order in the latter years of his life. Kyle Katarn is regarded by many as one of the most powerful Force wielders of his era, due to of course his unique perspective on the Force, which is that no power to Kyle Katarn was inherently light or dark side. It depends on the intent of the individual. The name of this ideology again is known as the potentium theory. It is proposed in the lore itself as a theory. However, while this is a creative perspective, the single man that for many decades before absolutely refuted this ideology and disproved it with this notion, Darth Plagueis. And in today's holocron, we will be exploring a battle of philosophies, the Sith's dedication to the dark side, and the idea that there actually is no dark or light, only the Force. In greater detail, the potentium theory is the idea that the Force is not divided, but is rather a neutral energy, one that manifests in varying ways. According to Kyle Katarn, there is really no such thing as the light or the dark side, and no ability is inherently tied to either side of the Force. Rather, when one manipulates the Force, their intentions and emotions are what dictate an ability's alignment, not the ability itself. It's an ideology that takes importance on personal responsibility. Now, while those who subscribe to the potentium theory don't necessarily believe in the opposing sides of the Force, they do understand that repeated use of abilities with dark purposes will lead one down a path, making repeated selfish or even cruel decisions at will, and thus in turn causes them to become corrupt and evil. This continues the emphasis that each person is responsible for their own actions, and whether or not they follow virtue or selfishness in their pursuit of the Force. With this ideology, Kyle Katarn was able to tap into powers of the light and the dark, as he was able to use Force lightning as a Jedi. He even at one point used a powerful and a very evil Sith spell known as the Dark Shear, doing so to kill an opponent, though he vowed that he would never do it again. But while this theory sounds convincing on the surface, there are several holes in it which continue the belief that there is actually a light and a dark. The first mistake is that the dark side is a very tangible thing. Many have heard of its whispers and have felt its pull. Of course, there is a part of self-discipline that comes with being responsible for which to call upon the Force and when to listen to it, but there can be no denying the strong seductive influence of the dark side. But we'll get into our own opinions in a moment. What about Darth Plagueis? What did he have to say of this ideology? The passage we read comes from the Plagueis novelization, where he is training with Sidious in the early years of his apprenticeship. Plagueis says this during this lesson: "No doubt the texts I've provided contain references to the so-called potentium theory. The light and dark depend on the intention of the user. This is yet another perversion of the truth, perpetuated by those who would keep us shackled to the Force. The power of water and the power of fire are entirely different. Glaciers and volcanoes both have the potential to transform landscapes, but one does so by burning what lies beneath, where the other spews forth the terrain. The Sith are not placid stars, but rather singularities. Rather than burn with muted purpose, we warp space and time to twist the galaxy to our own design." Plagueis goes on to teach that if one is not vigilant, the Force will chew them up and spit them back out, overtaking you, sweep you away with its enigmatic whims. Plagueis echoes the main Sith ideology, which is not to be moved by the Force, but to make the Force one's beast of burden, to use as they please. But of course, what does this all mean? Plagueis compares the light side to a glacier and the dark side to a volcano, speaking to their differences. His point being is that the light side by nature is suppression, whereas the dark side by nature is indulgence. With light, one must be measured and calm in their thoughts, not just in their thoughts in the moment that they use it, but always. The dark requires one to succumb to the passion, to the heat of emotion to use its power. This belief is echoed by Sith far before Plagueis. One of Bane's teachers on Korriban at one point makes mention of making oneself attractive to the dark side, indicating that the dark, and by proxy the light, both have wills and intention of their own. Qui-Gon Jinn speaks of the will of the living force, which would be the light side. Qui-Gon Jinn does not use or utilize the dark side of the Force in any way, but in fact has rejected it for the light, following the will of the light side no matter where it brings him. But the point is, we do know a verifiable truth that the light and the dark sides are tangible energies, both with goals, motivations, or even thoughts. They both have a will of their own. The Force is energy, and even though Plagueis does not believe in its mysticism, he knew this. The idea that the Force is a neutral energy that is manipulated by the will of an individual wielder places too much power in the hands of sentient beings, ignoring the fact that the Force can make choices for itself. Both sides of the Force individually can. If one is attracted to the light because of their discipline and peaceful nature, they may be able to lose control or allow themselves to slip into passion and fury from time to time, achieving more power, but they will never be able to acquire the real power of the dark side. And the same goes for the other way around as well. If you have a foot in one energy, the other side of the Force will resist you. While one may be able to achieve abilities from both sides with the Potentium theory, there will always be weakness in both sides of the Force, since both sides are actively resisting the other. The light is not committed to the dark, nor the dark the light. The ideology itself is false because it takes away the accountability of the Force and treats it more like an object rather than a living thing. Plagueis would later make this same mistake, which caused the Force to flee from his body, and because of that, his progress and power grew stagnant. So what is balance in the Force? Well, this is a matter of subjectivity, but the closest we get in all of the lore is the way that the ancient Jedi believed in balance. The Potentium theory is flawed because it uses both sides of the Force. Rather, true balance is accepting both sides of the Force. In conclusion, Potentium has a problem because it states that an individual is strong enough and willful enough that their own emotions and intentions dictate the nature of the ability they are intending to use, and it doesn't factor in that the Force does have two sides with very conflicting goals, neither of which want to be bent to the user's will. Balance is achieved by listening to the goals and intentions of the light and the dark at the same time, staying moderated with how one allows themselves to flow with it. It's a subtle difference, but a very important one that Revan found himself experiencing when he tapped into both aspects of the Force successfully. He found out how to apply the light side concepts of moderation to the dark side, and dark side concepts of indulgence with the passion of the light. But he never bent either of them to his will. He simply used his wisdom in every circumstance. But anyway, my friends, what do you think of this? What do you think of Potentium, Kyle Katarn's theory, and Darth Plagueis the Wise? Of the three ideologies of true balance, Kyle Katarn's idea of dark and light, or Plagueis's, which to you is the truth? Thank you as always for visiting the channel and the archives today, and may the Force be with you.